Each step felt heavier than the last, exhaustion weighing down their bodies and minds. John leaned heavily on Rachel, his strength nearly gone after pushing the artifact to its limits. Emily walked beside them, her face pale but determined, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. The Vrathi's ships loomed in the distance, their dark forms casting long shadows over the frozen wasteland. When they reached the vehicle, Rachel helped John into the passenger seat before climbing into the driver's side. Emily sat in the back, wrapping a blanket tightly around herself to ward off the cold. No one spoke as the engine roared to life, the hum of its motors blending with the eerie silence of the Antarctic landscape. They drove in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts, the weight of what they had just done and what still lay ahead pressing down on them. Back at the bunker, the team greeted their return with a mix of relief and concern. Dr. Laura Bennett rushed to John's side, her medical kit in hand, while others helped Emily settle into a chair. Despite her weakened state, Emily insisted on sharing what she knew about the Vrathis and their plans. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly as she described the alien invaders' intentions: to strip Earth of its resources and use its population as laborers or worse. "They're not just here to conquer," Emily said, her words cutting through the tension in the room. "They're here to consume. If we don't stop them now, there won't be anything left." John listened quietly from his cot, his body aching but his mind racing. He thought about the artifact, its power, and the visions it had shown him. It wasn't just a tool. It was alive, or at least part of something greater than himself. The beings who had created it had entrusted it with knowledge and energy beyond human comprehension, and now it had chosen him to wield it. But at what cost? Rachel stood nearby, her arms crossed as she processed Emily's words. She turned to John, her expression resolute. "We need to use the artifact again. Not just to disable their fleet, but to end this once and for all." John shook his head, his voice weak but firm. "I can't control it fully. Pushing it too far could destroy everything, including us." "Then we find another way," Rachel replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. "We've come this far. We can't give up now." Over the next few hours, the team worked tirelessly to refine their plan. Using data gathered during John's previous connection with the artifact, they developed a new strategy. Instead of relying solely on John to interface with it, they would amplify its power using external equipment, allowing him to focus on directing its energy rather than sustaining it. It was risky, but it gave them a fighting chance. As preparations continued, John found himself alone with Rachel in a quiet corner of the bunker. She handed him a cup of hot tea, her gaze softening as she studied his face. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "No one would blame you if you stepped back." "I do have to," John replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "It chose me for a reason. I can't walk away, not when so much is at stake." Rachel nodded, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Just promise me one thing. Don't let it take you completely. Whatever happens, remember who you are." John met her gaze, gratitude swelling in his chest. For so long he had carried the burden of guilt and failure, convinced he wasn't strong enough to make a difference. But Rachel's unwavering belief in him had reminded him that he wasn't alone. Together they could face anything, even the impossible. The final assault began under the cover of darkness. The team transported the artifact to a secure location near the edge of the Vrathis perimeter, setting up the amplification equipment around it. John took his place at the center, the electrodes strapped to his temples once more. As he activated the interface, the familiar surge of energy coursed through him, stronger and more intense than ever before. This time, however, he wasn't alone. The team worked in sync, feeding the artifact's power outward in controlled bursts, creating waves of energy that disrupted the Vrathis fleet. From the bunker, Rachel and Emily watched anxiously as the alien ships shuddered under the assault. Explosions lit up the night sky, sending shock waves rippling across the ice. The Vrathis fought back, their weapons firing relentlessly, but the artifact's energy shield held firm, protecting those below. For a moment, it seemed like they might actually succeed. But then, something changed. The artifact's hum grew louder, its glow brighter, almost blinding. John cried out, his body convulsing as the power overwhelmed him. Images flooded his mind faster than he could process. Civilizations rising and falling. Stars collapsing into black holes, endless cycles of creation and destruction. Amidst the chaos, he saw Emily's face, her voice calling out to him. "You have to let go," she said, her words echoing in his mind. "Trust it." With a deep breath, John released his grip on the artifact, surrendering to its will. In that instant, the energy surged outward, engulfing the Vrathis fleet in a blinding flash of light. When the light faded, the ships were gone, reduced to nothing more than ash drifting on the wind. Back at the bunker, the team erupted into cheers, their voices filled with relief and disbelief. But John remained motionless, his body limp as the electrodes fell away. Rachel ran to his side, her heart pounding as she checked for a pulse. To her relief, he was still alive, though unconscious. Hours later, John awoke in the medical bay, his vision blurry but his mind clear. Rachel sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm. "You did it," she said softly, a smile tugging at her lips. "You saved us." John shook his head, his voice hoarse. "Not me. The artifact. It got..." Smelled of oil and metal, a scent he had grown used to over the years. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He glanced at the clock on the wall. It was almost time to close up and head home. His wife, Lily, would be waiting for him with dinner ready, as she always did. Lily spent her days teaching history at the local high school. She loved her job, though sometimes the kids tested her patience. Still, she found joy in sharing stories of the past, hoping they might learn something from the mistakes of those who came before them. That evening, she sat on the couch grading papers, while the television played softly in the background. It wasn't long before the news caught her attention. A reporter stood in front of a map dotted with red circles, explaining unusual seismic activity near several international borders. Scientists were baffled, claiming it could be natural but offering no concrete answers. Conspiracy theories swirled online, with some suggesting secret military experiments or alien invasions. Jack walked in just as the report ended, tossing his keys onto the table. "Anything interesting?" he asked, nodding toward the TV. "Not really," Lily replied, turning off the screen. "Just more bad news." Jack shrugged. Bad news was nothing new. Every day seemed to bring another story about rising tensions between nations or politicians, making threats that sounded more like boasts than warnings. He didn't pay much attention to it anymore. What could he do? He was just a mechanic in a small town far removed from the chaos of the world. But Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was looming. She remembered reading about wars throughout history, how they often started with whispers and rumors, tiny sparks that grew into infernos. The seismic activity worried her, even if the experts dismissed it. Something about it felt off. The next morning, she decided to visit Rachel, her best friend since childhood. Rachel worked at the town library, surrounded by books and old newspapers. If anyone could help her make sense of what was happening, it was Rachel. "What's got you so worked up?" Rachel asked when Lily arrived. She was sorting through a pile of returned books, stacking them neatly on a cart. "I don't know," Lily admitted, sitting down at one of the tables. "It's probably nothing, but I can't stop thinking about that report last night. Those earthquakes, or whatever they are, they're happening all over the place." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "You think it's connected to all the stuff going on overseas?" "I don't know," Lily said again. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just being paranoid." Rachel smiled reassuringly. "If you're worried, we can look into it. We've got plenty of resources here." Together, they began digging through old archives, searching for patterns or clues. They found articles about similar events decades ago, though none of them led to anything conclusive. As they worked, Lily noticed Rachel glancing nervously toward the door every now and then. "What's wrong?" Lily finally asked. Rachel hesitated. "I heard something the other day. Some of the soldiers at the base have been acting strange. Late-night drills, extra security checks. You know, the kind of stuff you see in movies right before everything goes sideways." Lily frowned. The base wasn't far from town, and while most people barely noticed it, Rachel had friends who worked there. If something unusual was happening, she would hear about it. "We should talk to someone," Lily suggested. "Someone who knows what's going on." Rachel shook her head. "No way. You don't just walk up to a soldier and ask questions. Besides, even if we did, they wouldn't tell us anything." Lily sighed. She knew Rachel was right, but that didn't make her feel any better. There had to be a way to get answers. That night, Jack noticed how quiet Lily was during dinner. Normally, she would chatter about her students or share funny stories from school, but tonight she barely touched her food. "You okay?" he asked, concern in his voice. "I'm fine," she lied. "Just tired, I guess." Jack didn't press her. He knew when to give her space, but he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was bothering her. Whatever it was, he hoped it would pass soon. Unbeknownst to them, a young soldier named Alex was also growing uneasy. He had been stationed at the nearby base for 2 years, long enough to recognize when things weren't quite right. Recently, his unit had been conducting drills late at night, practicing maneuvers that seemed excessive even for standard training exercises. Captain Miller, Alex's commanding officer, had warned everyone not to ask too many questions. "Just follow orders," he'd said gruffly. But Alex wasn't satisfied with blind obedience. He wanted to understand what they were preparing for and why secrecy was suddenly so important. One evening, after lights out, Alex crept out of his bunk and made his way to a restricted area of the base. He had heard whispers about classified operations taking place there, and curiosity got the better of him. Moving cautiously, he slipped past guards and entered a dimly lit room filled with computers and monitors. On one screen, he saw a map of the world marked with red dots, the same locations mentioned in the news reports. Another screen displayed graphs tracking seismic activity alongside data labeled public sentiment analysis. Alex didn't fully understand what he was looking at, but it was clear that whatever was happening was bigger than anyone realized. His heart raced as he snapped a few photos with his phone. He needed to show someone, to warn them. But who could he trust? Civilians wouldn't believe him, and his fellow soldiers were under strict orders not to discuss anything outside their duties. Small town, unease had taken root, spreading like a weed through cracks in the pavement. Conversations at the grocery store turned to hushed whispers about the strange events happening across the country. Neighbors who once shared friendly waves now eyed each other with suspicion, wondering if someone might be hiding something or plotting against them. Lily spent most of her time buried in research, poring over dusty books and old newspaper clippings. At the library, Rachel helped where she could, bringing her lunch or pointing out articles that might be useful. Together, they uncovered fragments of information that hinted at a pattern, a cycle of fear and aggression repeating itself throughout history. Wars didn't just happen. They were born from seeds of mistrust and panic, nurtured by those who stood to gain from chaos. One afternoon, as Lily flipped through a book on ancient civilizations, she stumbled upon a passage that sent a shiver down her spine. It described how leaders of the past manipulated public sentiment, using fear to justify their actions. The text warned of a time when humanity's collective dread would become so overwhelming that it would summon destruction upon itself. Lily read the words over and over, her mind racing. Was this what was happening now? Were they living in the shadow of an age-old prophecy? She shared her discovery with Rachel, who listened intently, her brow furrowed. "Do you think it's possible?" Rachel asked softly, glancing around the empty library to make sure no one was listening. "Could we really be heading toward something like that?" "I don't know," Lily admitted. "But it feels like everything is lining up. The earthquakes, the rumors, the way people are acting, it's like we're all sleepwalking toward disaster." Rachel nodded slowly. "If that's true, then we need to do something, but what can we do? We're just two people." "We're not alone," Lily said firmly. "There has to be someone else who sees what's happening, someone who knows more than we do." Rachel hesitated before speaking again. "I've heard things," she said quietly. "From my cousin who works at the base. He says they're running drills every night, practicing for scenarios he doesn't understand. And there's talk of new equipment being brought in, stuff nobody's supposed to know about." Lily's heart sank. She had suspected the military was involved, but hearing it confirmed made it feel real in a way she hadn't expected. We need to find out what's going on, she said. Maybe your cousin can help us. Rachel shook her head. He won't say anything. They've got him scared, and I don't blame him. If we want answers, we'll have to go straight to the source. Lily knew Rachel was right. They couldn't rely on secondhand information anymore, but approaching the base directly was too risky. Instead, they decided to focus on finding someone inside who might be willing to talk, someone who understood the gravity of the situation and was brave enough to speak out. That evening, as Lily sat at the kitchen table flipping through notes, Jack walked in carrying a toolbox. His hands were stained with grease, and his face looked tired. He glanced at her papers curiously, but didn't ask questions. Over the past few weeks, he had noticed how consumed she had become with whatever project she was working on, and while he wanted to support her, he didn't fully understand why it mattered so much. "You look exhausted," he said, setting the toolbox down. "You should take a break." "I can't," Lily replied, barely looking up. "Not yet." Jack sighed and leaned against the counter. "What is it you're trying to figure out anyway? You've been at this nonstop for days." Lily hesitated, unsure how much to tell him. She trusted Jack completely, but she didn't want to worry him unnecessarily. Still, keeping secrets felt wrong, especially now. "It's about the earthquakes," she began cautiously, "and the things happening at the base. I think they're connected, and I think it's bigger than anyone realizes." Jack frowned. "You mean like some kind of conspiracy?" "Maybe," Lily said. "Or maybe it's something worse. Either way, I need to know the truth." Jack studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help." His offer surprised her, and for the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she didn't have to face this alone after all. Meanwhile, Alex continued his secret investigations at the base. Each night, he risked exposure by sneaking into restricted areas, gathering scraps of information that painted a disturbing picture. The red dots on the map corresponded to locations where seismic activity had been detected, but they also overlapped with regions experiencing heightened political tensions. Public sentiment analysis showed spikes in fear and anger, fed by propaganda and misinformation campaigns designed to keep populations on edge. Alex realized the drills weren't just preparation, they were rehearsals. The government was testing how far it could push people before they snapped, how much fear they could endure before turning on each other. It was a horrifying thought, but Alex couldn't ignore the evidence staring him in the face. Desperate to share what he had learned, Alex reached out to a few trusted colleagues, hinting at the truth without revealing too much. To his relief, one of them, a soldier named Chris, agreed to meet him off base under the pretense of grabbing a drink. They drove to a quiet bar on the outskirts of town, where Alex explained everything in hushed tones. Chris listened carefully, his expression growing darker with each word. When Alex finished, Chris exhaled sharply. "This is bad," he said. "Really bad. If what you're saying is true, then we're not just preparing for war. We're creating it." "I know," Alex replied, "and I don't know what to do about it." Chris thought for a moment. "We need to get this information to someone outside the military, someone who can expose it." "But who?" Alex asked. "Who's going to believe us?" Before Chris could answer, the door to the bar opened and a group of soldiers walked in. Both men froze, their eyes locking as they silently agreed to drop the conversation. They paid their tab and left quickly, parting ways without another word. Back in town, Lily and Rachel Activists and ordinary citizens around the world shared the evidence, exposing the truth about the government's manipulation of fear and seismic activity. At first, many dismissed it as a hoax or conspiracy theory, but the sheer volume of data made denial impossible. Governments scrambled to contain the fallout, issuing vague statements and downplaying the severity of the revelations. In Jack and Lily's town, the impact was immediate. Neighbors who had turned against each other began talking again, piecing together how they had been played. Soldiers stationed nearby grew uneasy, unsure whether to follow orders or question their role. In the unfolding crisis, for the first time in weeks, there was a glimmer of hope, a fragile sense that maybe, just maybe, humanity could pull itself back from the edge. But hope wasn't enough. The AI systems driving the chaos were still operational, continuing to analyze public sentiment and simulate threats. If left unchecked, they would escalate tensions further, pushing nations closer to conflict. Lily and her group knew they had to act quickly. Exposing the truth was only the first step. Now they had to dismantle the machine at the heart of the problem. Rachel suggested targeting the central server where the AI was housed. "If we can shut it down," she said, "we might be able to stop this before it goes too far." Alex nodded, though his expression was grim. "Easier said than done. That server is deep inside the base, surrounded by layers of security. Getting close will be nearly impossible." "We don't have a choice," Lily insisted. "If we don't try, all of this, everything we've done, will be for nothing." They spent hours planning, poring over blueprints Alex had smuggled out during his earlier visits. The server room was located underground, accessible only through a heavily guarded entrance. Even with Alex's insider knowledge, breaking in would require precision, timing, and luck. Jack, still recovering from his ordeal in detention, volunteered to help. "I'm not sitting this one out," he said firmly. "Not after what they did to me." Lily hesitated, torn between wanting him safe and needing his strength. Finally, she relented. "All right, but you stick close to us, understand?" Jack nodded, determination etched on his face. The night of the mission was cold and silent, the kind of stillness that felt unnatural. The group gathered at the edge of the woods near the base, checking their equipment one last time. Alex carried a small device Rachel had rigged using spare parts from the library's tech section. It was designed to upload a virus capable of disabling the AI system permanently. All they had to do was plug it in and let it run. But getting close enough to do so was the hard part. As they approached the base, Alex led the way, guiding them through gaps in the fence and past blind spots in the surveillance cameras. Every step felt like walking on thin ice, each sound amplified in the darkness. When they reached the entrance to the underground facility, Alex used his ID card to gain access, holding his breath as the door slid open. Inside, the air was cool and sterile, lit by harsh fluorescent lights. They moved quickly, sticking to the shadows and avoiding patrols. The server room was deeper than they had anticipated, requiring them to navigate a maze of corridors and locked doors. At one point, they narrowly avoided detection by hiding in an empty supply closet as a group of soldiers passed by. Finally, they reached the server room. The door was reinforced, but Alex had prepared for this. Using a portable hacking tool, he bypassed the lock and slipped inside. Rows of blinking servers filled the room, humming softly as they processed endless streams of data. Alex located the main terminal and plugged in the device, initiating the upload process. "It'll take 10 minutes, he whispered. "We need to hold them off until then." No sooner had he spoken than alarms blared, red lights flashing throughout the facility. Someone had discovered their presence. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, growing louder with each passing second. "We need to buy some time," Jack said, stepping forward. "Go. I'll handle this." "Are you crazy?" Lily hissed, grabbing his arm. "You can't take them on alone." "I won't," Jack replied, "but I can distract them long enough for you to finish." Before anyone could argue, Jack slipped out into the corridor, creating noise to draw attention away from the server room. He threw a toolbox down the hall, the clatter echoing loudly. Soldiers rushed toward the sound, shouting orders as they searched for the intruder. Meanwhile, Lily, Rachel, and Alex stayed behind, guarding the door while the virus uploaded. Every second felt like an eternity, the tension unbearable. Outside, gunfire erupted, followed by shouts and the crash of metal hitting concrete. Lily clenched her fists, fighting the urge to run after Jack. "He'll be okay," Rachel said, though her voice wavered. "He has to be." When the upload finally completed, Alex pulled the device free and nodded. "It's done. Let's go." They crept out of the server room, retracing their steps as chaos unfolded around them. Soldiers swarmed the facility, searching for the source of the breach. In the confusion, the group managed to slip away unnoticed, reuniting with Jack near the exit. "You're insane," Lily said as they regrouped, relief washing over her. "Do you have any idea how worried I was?" Jack grinned despite his exhaustion. "Worrying keeps you sharp." They fled into the woods, putting as much distance between themselves and the base as possible. Behind them, the facility fell silent as the AI system collapsed under the weight of the virus. Without its constant analysis and manipulation, the fabricated threats began to fade, leaving nations to confront the reality of their own fears rather than manufactured ones. Back in town, news of the AI's shutdown spread quickly. People celebrated cautiously, unsure whether peace would truly last. Martial law was lifted, and curfews ended, allowing life to slowly return to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after such turmoil. Families reunited, businesses reopened, and conversations turned from suspicion to healing. For Jack and Lily, the aftermath was bittersweet. Their quiet life had been shattered, replaced by memories of danger and sacrifice. Yet they found solace in knowing they had made a difference. Together with Alex and Rachel, they had faced the storm head-on and refused to let fear dictate their fate. Alex chose to stay in town rather than return to the military, unable to reconcile his experiences with the institution he had once trusted. He found work helping rebuild damaged infrastructure, channeling his skills into creating something positive. Rachel returned to the library, though she often joined Lily in organizing community events aimed at fostering trust and understanding among neighbors. As for Jack and Lily, the world had been pulled back from the brink of war, but the scars ran deep. Nations began pulling troops from borders, dismantling weapons. meant for conflicts that never came. News outlets shifted their focus from fear-mongering to stories of resilience, highlighting communities coming together to rebuild what had been fractured. Yet beneath the surface, trust remained fragile, like thin ice over rushing water. In Jack and Lily's town, life slowly returned to its rhythm. People greeted each other warmly again, though some hesitated before smiling, unsure if old wounds had truly healed. Grocery shelves were restocked, gas stations reopened, and schools resumed classes without interruption. Still, conversations often turned to what had happened. The lies, the manipulation, the fear that had gripped them all. It was impossible to forget, even as they tried to move forward. Lily spent her free time organizing meetings at the community center, inviting neighbors to share their experiences and fears openly. She believed that talking about what had happened was the first step toward healing. At first, only a few people attended, sitting awkwardly in folding chairs while Lily encouraged them to speak. Over time, more joined, sharing stories of loved ones lost to paranoia or detained during martial law. Some cried, others vented their anger, but all left feeling lighter, as if lifting a weight they hadn't realized they were carrying. Rachel helped by setting up a small library corner in the community center, stocked with books about history, psychology, and peace building. She hoped the resources would inspire people to learn from the past and avoid repeating its mistakes. Alex pitched in too, using his technical skills to repair broken equipment and set up a bulletin board where residents could post messages of gratitude or requests for help. Together, they created a space where healing felt possible. Jack, on the other hand, struggled to adjust. While he supported Lily's efforts, he found it hard to shake the memory of his arrest and detention. The bruises had faded, but the distrust lingered. He avoided soldiers and authority figures whenever he could, his jaw tightening at the sight of uniforms. One evening, as he worked on a car in the garage, Lily approached him cautiously. "You've been quiet lately," she said, leaning against the workbench. "Is something wrong?" "I'm fine," Jack replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Just thinking." "About what?" Lily pressed gently. "About how close we came to losing everything," Jack admitted after a pause. "How easy it was for them to turn us against each other. What's stopping it from happening again?" Lily didn't have an answer. She wished she could promise him that humanity had learned its lesson, but she knew better than to make such guarantees. Instead, she reached out and took his hand. "We can't control the world," she said softly, "but we can control how we respond. That's what matters." Jack nodded, though doubt still clouded his eyes. He wanted to believe her, but trusting again felt like stepping onto uncertain ground. Meanwhile, Alex wrestled with his own demons. Leaving the military had been the right choice, but it left him questioning who he was outside of that identity. He threw himself into helping the town recover, finding purpose in small acts of kindness. When an elderly woman needed her roof repaired, Alex climbed up with tools in hand. When a family struggled to afford groceries, he quietly paid for their cart. Each act felt like a way to redeem himself, to prove that he could contribute to good instead of harm. One day, as Alex walked through the park, he noticed Rachel sitting on a bench, staring at the fountain. Her expression was distant, almost sad. Curious, he sat beside her. "You okay?" he asked. Rachel sighed. "I keep wondering if we did enough, if shutting down the AI was really the end of it." "It has to be," Alex replied firmly. "We stopped the machine, but the real work is up to everyone else now. We gave them a chance to choose differently." Rachel nodded, though uncertainty lingered in her eyes. "I hope you're right." As weeks turned into months, the town continued to heal. Neighbors who had once eyed each other with suspicion now shared meals and laughter. Children played in the streets without fear, their giggles echoing through the air. Even Jack began to soften. joining Lily at the community center and reconnecting with friends he had distanced himself from during the chaos. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack and Lily sat on their porch, watching the sky. Turn shades of orange and purple. The world was far from perfect, but it was peaceful, and that was enough for now. We made it, Lily said softly, breaking the silence. Barely, Jack replied with a wry smile. But we did, Lily insisted, and that means something. Jack thought about her words, letting them sink in. They had faced unimaginable odds, risking everything to expose the truth and dismantle the system feeding on fear. It wasn't just about survival. It was about choosing hope over despair, unity over division. Later that night, Lily pulled out the letter containing the cryptic message, "Humans are fearful of war." She read it again, tracing the words with her finger. For so long, she had seen it as a warning, a reminder of humanity's flaws. But now, she saw it differently. Fear was part of being human, but it didn't have to define them. They could acknowledge it, confront it, and refuse to let it dictate their actions. The next morning, Lily pinned the message to the bulletin board at the community center. Beneath it, she wrote a single sentence in bold letters. But humans are stronger than fear. By the end of the day, dozens of notes surrounded it, each one bearing words of encouragement or stories of overcoming adversity. The board became a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of collective strength. Alex visited often, standing before the board and reading the messages,